Good morning. Today our text was from the book of 1 Samuel, a book that we're going to be staying in for the rest of the month of June. It's a beguiling story, especially if we don't read too far ahead or think too much about it. But if we are actually going to think about being called by God and what that might mean, I think we need to take a good, hard, biblical look at what that might mean to be called by God and what we might be getting into. I don't know about you, but I have heard a voice in the night calling my name many times. Mostly it's my title, which is Mom. Occasionally it's Pastor Rosanna. When my children were little, it was a call from the nursery or from the downstairs bedroom. Later on, it was a phone call from school after a late band competition or from wherever they were stranded or needed help. My kids knew not to call me unless it was really important because I am a great sleeper. I am not a very good waker-upper. It's amazing that my children survived infancy. When I get a call from Creekside in the middle of the night or early in the morning, my heart sinks because it is probably not good news. Disasters need to be addressed immediately. Usually good news can wait until daylight. With a few exceptions, a call in the middle of the night is a cause for concern. At very least, it means I'm going to have to stop being asleep and comfortable and have to wake up and deal with something which is probably going to take some effort. In the past, I have imagined this story of Samuel kind of as a cross between a Sunday school story and a bedtime story. It's this little boy precocious little Samuel, who his mom dedicated to God's service before he was even born. Little Sammy has been living at the temple since he was 3 years old with wise old Eli. I can just imagine Sammy padding down the hall in his footy pajamas in the middle of the night when he heard his name to say, "Eli, what is it that you need?" Isn't that sweet? It is, until you read the rest of the story. God calls Samuel 3 times before Eli figures it out that it's God who is calling and tells Samuel, all right, the next time you hear that voice, say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And God's voice speaks again, and Samuel says, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And God, in fact, does speak to Samuel. And in verse 11, God says, "I am about to do something in Israel that will make everyone who hears about it, it will make both of their ears tingle." God says that. Only what God tells Samuel is not good news. It's bad news. And it's bad news about Eli, this kind old man who has raised Samuel since the age of 3. Samuel has to be the one to deliver this bad news to Eli. And as you might imagine, Samuel doesn't get any more sleep that night. I would like this story of a call from God in the middle of the night if it had a happier ending. Things end up pretty well for Samuel. We're told at the end of the chapter that he grew to be a trusted prophet of the Lord. And the biblical text uses this wonderful phrase, "The Lord was with him and let none of his words fall to the ground." That's what I pray for when I preach every Sunday. Things don't end so well for Eli, though. Eli was a good man, but his sons had blasphemed God and dishonored the temple. And a couple chapters later, those boys are killed in a battle with the Philistines. And when a messenger comes to Eli to tell him that the ark of the Lord has been captured and that his sons are dead, Eli falls over backwards out of his chair and breaks his neck and dies. So what do we do when we get that call in the middle of the night? Maybe it's a call from God. Maybe it's a call from the police or from the hospital. First thing we do is wake up. Wake up, clear the cobwebs, and face the reality that this is going to take some effort on our part. We might indulge in some self-pity on our way out the door. Oh, I didn't get a good night's sleep last night either. Why does this always happen to me? But self-pity is not going to take care of that for us. We need more than hand-wringing when we face difficult things. My brother-in-law, Dan, is leaving his longtime position as the director of Brethren Volunteer Services this fall. He has a master's in social work and has started doing therapy for children and adolescents. And he asked me to letter a line of type to frame and put on the wall of his office. It's a lyric from a song by Indiana folk singer Carrie Newcomer. Some of you familiar with Carrie Newcomer. Here's what it says. You can do this hard thing. Those are good words for any of us to remember. You can do this hard thing. God did not call Samuel to tell him what a great kid he was and to keep up the hard work. God didn't call Samuel to tell Samuel that he was going to be a great prophet and that God would be there to be sure that none of his words hit the ground. God called Samuel to do a hard thing. And God did not even tell Samuel how to do it. God just said, here's what I'm going to do. And Samuel had to figure out how to give that news to Eli. I've had to wrestle with this passage a bit because I think it makes God sound kind of mean. And I don't believe that God is mean. So here's where I come out, at least today, on the calling of Samuel. I think it has a lot of relevance for us at Creekside. Ministry has never been an easy thing. There are great needs in our neighborhoods and in our communities, and God is forever demanding more of us than we think we have to give. This is not because God is mean. This is partly because it's way easier for us to try and burrow under the covers and stay asleep than it is to wake up and see where God is calling us. It is also because the hard things that we are being called to do are not our things. They're God's things. The places where God is calling us to ministry are places where God already is. There is not a school or a community building or a hospital room where God is not with us. These are ministries which need to be done and will only be accomplished by people who are willing to wake up and say, "Here I am, Lord. What is it that you want me to do?" You're going to be invited to stay in the worship center after the service today to view a short video on mutual ministry. Following that, we're asking everyone who can stay to be part of an information session and discussion as part of a table talk time about the community ministry grant that we've received and the new ministry which we'll be discovering together in the coming months. Diane Lund and Ron Nicodemus and I went to an information session in Indianapolis last month, and one of the presenters said, "This is not like assembling a piece of furniture from a kit. where you have step-by-step directions, and you know if you do those properly in the right order, you will end up with a chair, like this picture on the box. Now, that is not intimidating to me at all, because I have never had the discipline to follow step-by-step directions and assemble a chair. If you don't believe this, talk to Tim. I know it's intimidating for folks who want to see what the chair is supposed to look like before we get started. But the process of doing this together and discovering it together is actually how we learn about ourselves and learn about God and learn how God is with us along the journey. We'll be exploring and figuring out what it means for us to do community ministry where we work with our neighbors rather than doing things for them. I imagine that this might mean some sleepless nights where we sit up in bed and say, God, is that you? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? That sounds really hard. I think it's unlikely that God is going to provide us with an instruction manual with detailed step-by-step processes. But I believe that as long as we join with what God has already planned, we can do this hard thing. With God's help and the support of this community, we can do this hard thing. We might even find this hard thing rewarding in ways that we could not have imagined. For years, I had in my office a poster by artist Mary Engelbright. Here's what it said: "No matter where you go, there you are." Brothers and sisters, here we are. I believe that God has put us in this place at this time for a reason. I believe that God has a ministry for us to do, and we need to listen and say, here we are. Our ministry is where we are. Our ministry is where God has already been and is calling us to go. We can do this hard thing. Here we are.